Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Why do Americans spell judgment without the first E? I mean, the word judge has an E at the end, but yet when you make it judgment, you get rid of that E. Why? It makes no sense.
It doesn't work that way.
Terminator 2 Judgment Day takes place 10 years after the original, with John Connor, played by Edward Furlong, now growing up and clearly not being 10, but more like 12 or 13 at least. Just saying.
Affirmative.
In fact, Arnold says at one point that Doomsday's going to happen in 3 years' time, which is 1997, making this film 1994, 10 years after the first film's release, which is when Sarah was made pregnant, so John would be 9 here. Sorry, there's no way he's 9 years old. Look at him!
Are we learning yet?
His mum, once again played by Linda Hamilton, informed the authorities about the crazy cyborgs from the future, and for some reason they don't believe her, and she's now locked up in a mental asylum despite numerous escape attempts, forcing her son into foster care. John is soon followed by Robert Patrick and the returning Arnold Schwarzenegger, but whoop, plot twist, as Arnold is actually protecting him this time, and Patrick is an even more advanced cyborg called the T-1000 sent back to kill John. They save his mother, who reluctantly trusts Arnold, as he and John form a really emotional connection before banding together with the man who'd later be responsible for Skynet, Miles, destroying all of the work that would cause the future destruction, including Arnold finally sacrificing himself for the better good in a really emotional scene where John has to say goodbye and Arnold realizes the true meaning of a human life. And I'm not crying, you're crying! Shut up, this feels amazing!
I know now why you cry.
A sequel to the original was immediately considered after the first one's release, but limitations with CGI effects at the time caused constant delays, something that was essential for the film's T-1000 character. In 1989, James Cameron came out with The Abyss to show that it could be done, but furthermore, the rights to the series were owned by the Hemdale Film Corporation and Carolco Pictures, who were reluctant to greenlight a sequel due to funding issues. Arnold Schwarzenegger managed to persuade the head of Carolco, Mario Casar, to bid for the rights. He claimed it was something they'd been looking at for years and they should go all out no matter the cost to get it done. It was eventually bought for $5 million in 1990 and it was finally greenlit. Hamilton, Schwarzenegger and Cameron were already on board from the get-go to produce a second film before Cameron cast Edward Furlong as John Connor. Side note, he was 12 years old in real life. See, I knew it!
Chill out. Dickwad.
In fact, Charlie Korsmo was actually offered the role but turned it down to star in What About Bob, and the casting director Marley Finn was unimpressed with the hundreds of professional actors who tried out. He discovered Furlong in a boys' club, and after meeting him for just a few minutes, he realised he had the perfect attitude for the part. In fact, Linda Hamilton's identical twin sister Leslie was actually used at times when they needed two of them in the exact same shot. Clever.
Total loser.
And weirdly, Billy Idol was actually the first choice to play the T-1000, but he was unable to do it due to, ironically, a horrifying motorcycle accident. Wow. I bet he let out a rebel yell.
No sense of humor.
Lead singer of Wasp, Blackie Lawless, was then considered, and Arnold even pushed for him to get the part, but at 6'3", he was considered too tall as the character needed to be able to blend in easily with other humans. Cameron even considered having Michael Biehn come back as the T-1000 in a complete reversal of the first film, but determined it would have been far too confusing for the audience to follow. Then Genesis came out, and confusion just became common practice in the series.
We need to be a little more constructive here, okay?
Patrick was cast as the T-1000 after his appearance in Die Hard 2, and specifically because of how fast he could run. This would differ him and Schwarzenegger's approach from the previous movie, but honestly, I just can't picture anyone doing a better job than Patrick.
Have you seen this boy?
Denzel Washington was offered the part of Miles, but turned it down after reading the script. He claimed all the part was sweating and looking scared, and it just did not interest him.
Denzel Washington, the best actor ever.
The screenplay's first draft was finished on May the 10th, 1990, and by July had already been finalised, scheduled to be released on Independence Day of 1991. Filming began on October the 9th, 1990, and spanned until March 28th the following year, taking place in California and New Mexico. Terminator 2 Judgment Day was premiered in LA on July the 1st, 1991, and was released just days later to worldwide acclaim. During its opening weekend, Terminator 2 broke a record, earning $52 million, surpassing Batman 2 years earlier. In fact, it outgrossed the first Terminator movie in just 4 days alone. It had a budget of $102 million, which was the most expensive film ever made at the time, and worldwide it ended up grossing a ridiculous $519 million. In fact, it was the only sequel in the entire decade of the 90s to be the highest grossing film of the year it came out. The Phantom Menace was top of its year, but don't listen to Doug Walker, it's a prequel, not a sequel, so it doesn't count.
Son of a bitch, I knew it.
It was the only sequel to ever win an Oscar while the predecessor won 0, and it would hold this record until 2007 when The Bourne Ultimatum came out. It picked up 2 British Academy Film Awards for Best Sound and Best Effects, 5 Saturn Awards for Linda Hamilton, James Cameron, Edward Furlong, Best Special Effects and Best Sci-Fi, a People's Choice Award for Favourite Motion Picture, and 4 Academy Awards for Best Makeup, Best Sound Editing, and Best Visual Effects. The American Film Institute listed it as the 8th best science fiction film ever. It had Arnold as the 48th greatest hero, whereas the previous film he was the 22nd greatest villain, the only entry on the list on both categories. And the famous line,
Hasta la vista, baby.
was voted as the 76th greatest movie quote in history. It was even converted to 3D in 2017, but it didn't gross nearly as much as its predecessors such as Titanic 3D, Jurassic Park 3D, or The Lion King 3D. And it was entirely pointless. Like, Terminator 2 looked absolutely amazing. There was literally no reason to turn it to 3D. Like, no reason. It made no sense.
Maybe.
The special effects definitely hold up, and I think this is one of the reasons why I get so frustrated with Hollywood these days. These clearly outshine the ones today, and I just don't understand it. Furlong is a true delight in the film. He captures the teenage attitude, because he's a teenager and not a goddamn 9-year-old, really well. He acts like a dick to his parents, but it's usual kid stuff that you can relate to.
Your foster parents are kind of dicks, huh?
Yeah, they're the dicks. And much like any kid who now has full protection, he takes complete advantage of it. He's a lovable kid who you really enjoy watching and you truly want to see him survive. He's a good hero, but he still whines and gets embarrassed by his mum. He's a very real character. For a new actor, it's mind-blowing how good he is, especially during the emotional scenes that most professionally trained actors would struggle with. It's probably one of the most impressive acting debuts I've ever seen. Hamilton is great and definitely got even better transitioning from the damsel in distress to a complete badass, and in my mind, the greatest female hero in film history. Sorry, Ripley. Her acting is tremendous, and she really nails the delivery of every line perfectly, whether it's subtle or emotional.
Anybody not wearing 2 million sunblock is gonna have a real bad day. Get it?
Her seeing her old enemy for the first time is actually directed perfectly. Cameron slows down the footage, and honestly, this shows he is a master of visually telling some intense stories. This further shows later in the film where Miles is wounded and is holding the detonator. The SWAT team rush in and he struggles to keep holding it up. His breathing slowly stops, we cut to outside, silence, and then explosion. Basic filmmaking now, but revolutionary for its time, and Cameron paved the way. Now, I also feel like Arnold is actually an underrated talent. I used to think he was just this bland, emotionless robot, so this movie was the perfect role for him and no acting was really required, but actually, far from it. A lot more acting was needed for this part than you'd think, and I think people forget about that. Arnold has to play this emotionless cyborg who over a long period of time slowly begins to actually gain emotions and feel. He has to play this robotic reluctance to feelings, and it's actually an incredibly task to undergo, but he delivers it amazingly. The chemistry between him and Furlong is spectacular. You really love seeing them bond. John teaches him how to be human, which Arnold actually claims was his favourite scenes of the film. This huge cyborg trying to blend in as a normal human being but failing miserably, he just found really funny. The relationship is a slow progression, but it's beautifully done, so when he has to sacrifice himself, it truly is heartbreaking. How about this? This line was famously improvised by Arnold.
I need a vacation.
Actually, it wasn't! Yeah, let's ruin all the Terminator 2 trivia for you. It was actually revealed in the book Terminator 2 Judgment Day, a book of the film and illustrated screenplay that was actually written in quite early, so I'm not sure why it was public knowledge that this was apparently ad-libbed by Arnold on set. The Terminator also does not lose an ounce of his coolness by now being a good guy. John has to teach him that killing is wrong, but he still resorts to violence a lot.
He'll live.
He's so badass despite not killing, and apparently Schwarzenegger was actually quite reluctant to have his character not kill anymore. He feared that the studio were trying to soften the violence like they did with Conan the Destroyer, but Cameron convinced him it was the right move, and it really works. Although, Arnold claimed after this he never wanted to play a villain again. Clearly he read the script to Batman and Robin and thought, oh, this screenplay is so good, I'll scrap my rule just this once. And Around the World in 80 Days. Kind of. There's really clever moments like when John calls his foster parents, but Arnold imitates his voice to test to see if it's really them or the T-1000. It's really well written stuff. Until the prick kills the dog. Why'd you have to go there? Why? Why do they kill dogs?
Why would they?
There's a whole section where they reboot Arnold's system and Sarah considers destroying the chip while they have the chance. It's such good storytelling and I'm so glad they put this scene in last minute. Yeah, while the film was being edited, they went back to the drawing board. You see, towards the end of the film, Arnold gets supposedly killed but boots back up. Cameron thought there wasn't enough of an explanation, so he called his actors back in for a reshoot. Schwarzenegger actually had to cancel Christmas plans with Bruce Willis to shoot it, and they filmed this scene where the Terminator system is rebooted. I really want to see what Christmas dinner plans with the Terminator and John McClane would have looked like.
Excellent.
There's a part where Sarah snaps and considers killing Miles to prevent it all, but she realises she's as bad as the Terminator from the first film and just can't bring herself to do it. The storytelling is just perfection. There's a subtle moment where Arnold and John see some kids innocently playing with toy guns while they know what the future holds. You know, for a high-budget, intense action film, it does have a lot of nice, subtle touches in there. Although, there were difficulties during production. During the famous chase scene, Arnold was unable to use a glove when cocking the shotgun, so his hand constantly got trapped in the firearm's mechanism. He actually ended up tearing the skin from his fingers many times, and he had to simply fight through the pain, because if he showed any of it on his face, it would have just ruined the entire shot. True badass. But are there any flaws with the greatest sequel of all time? Of course there are! Let's ruin it for you!
I want to know everything.
This movie, despite how awesome it is, skews the timeline even more. So the basic setup right off the bat is that Skynet knows the first Terminator failed to eliminate John Connor, so they send the T-1000 back to do the job instead. First of all, why didn't they just send him to kill John when he was a baby? Why wait 10 years, even though he's clearly a teenager? Second of all, let's go back to my whiteboard. Okay, so in 1984, okay, first Terminator comes, tra-la-la-la-la, Terminator comes, and he gets killed. Boom, killed by Kyle, or technically Sarah. So they killed the Terminator, right? And in the future, they know about this, okay? Now, how do they know that this failed when they're in the future? But even if you want to stretch your mind about that, surely, because that's the past, they already know that this one failed. So, how then would they send another one back in 1994, which is when this film is set, to... Are you see where I'm going here? There's an easy solution for all of this. Skynet knows. Skynet in the first film send the Terminator back to kill John, or to kill Sarah before John's conceived. And that's why they send Kyle back. All Skynet had to do was not send anyone back. Don't send a Terminator back. Because that is the specific reason why Kyle was sent back. Don't send a Terminator back. Kyle's not sent back. And then that means John's dad is never there, which means there's no one to knock up Sarah. Or if it is, it's different DNA, which means no John Connor.
He hasn't even been born yet. It messes with your head.
They even acknowledge that it makes no sense. Stop drawing attention to your own plot holes. That's my job. The film also does a decent job teasing Arnold and Robert Patrick arriving in the present day. You know, you don't know which one is there to protect John. It's a nice interesting swerve if it wasn't for the fact that they already revealed it in the trailer. All the suspense in the film is done really well, but it's kind of pointless, really. I mean, wouldn't it have been awesome if the trailer led the audience to believe that Arnold was back to finish the job with Sarah and John, but then the movie dropped and it was actually the complete opposite? Nah, what am I thinking?
That's original.
Also, it makes no sense why Dr. Silberman doesn't even believe Sarah's claims of the Terminator. I mean, he was in the original. There were tons of witnesses of Arnold being immune to bullets. He was caught on CCTV as they reveal later. There's tons of evidence and they still dispute it.
I just need to ask him a few questions. He's a good-looking boy.
Creepy.
There was a guy here this morning looking for him, too.
Yeah, a big guy on a bike. Has that got something to do with this?
Why the hell aren't they a little bit concerned about a 6-foot giant bodybuilding Austrian biker man looking for their small child? I mean, a cop I can understand. But Arnold, come on.
I feel much better now. Clearer.
Yes, your attitude has been much improved lately.
Yeah, earlier you said...
She, stabbed me in the kneecap with my pen a few weeks ago.
Yeah, she's been great for 6 months.
I know I haven't been here that long, but I was wondering if you could tell me, if you know.
Know what?
Well, if you know where it came from.
A terrible miniseries. The first time John actually sees Arnold is honestly epic. It's so intense, but again, bullets should not make them flinch, let alone affect them this much, especially since the T-1000 is supposed to be even stronger than Arnold. This also seems to be the absolute worst police force in history, this huge chase sequence, and no one shows up once. What the hell does it take to get their attention? None of these doctors notice the 6-foot-tall bodybuilding Austrian giant approaching them with a shotgun.
I have detailed files on human anatomy.
Yeah, just not crying.
What's wrong with your eyes?
Or smiling.
Smile once in a while.
Smile?
It's funny, but it makes no sense.
The CPU is a neural net processor, a learning computer. But Skynet presets the switch to read only when we are sent out alone.
Oh, this makes a whole lot of no sense. The first film, he remembers someone saying,
"Fuck you, asshole."
and then he uses it later on. In this very film, before they even reboot his system, he clearly remembers it when John teaches him that killing is bad. Fail. At one point, Sarah completely ditches John to go and try and kill Miles herself. I mean, I know she's left him in the care of Arnold, but still, 2 people protecting him is better than 1. Couldn't Arnold just go to, like, the military? You know, do that, show his arm, reveal what he is, show that they're telling the truth about the future, and then John's got absolute protection. But now, here's where the plot holes get even more ridiculous. So, it's revealed that Miles and Skynet began working on the cyborgs because they retrieved the arm from the first Terminator. Okay, let's go back to this. So, in the future, they've got Skynet. They've got cyborgs, they got all the cyborgs in the future, and they send Arnold back in the first one to kill Sarah, right? But that's how they create themselves. It's a loop. But again, this is 1984. So how is this possible? How do they... This is the reason. Arnold being sent back is the reason that in 1994, they begin production of Skynet for the Doomsday in 1997. Right? But how can that happen when these aren't around? These aren't around in the original timeline. The original timeline of the universe. This isn't here. This isn't possible. Arnold's not here. So we can't get to this in Terminator 2 to then get to the future. But you don't care because they're awesome.
I think it's that guy from the mall. Yeah, it's him and the woman. Look, just send everything you got in the area right now. Including some acting lessons right now.
So the trio get to Miles and reveal all of the information. They then plan what to do and leave. But bear in mind, Arnold says the T-1000 would easily be able to predict this move, but yet it still takes Robert Patrick about 65 years just to get there. What the hell was he doing? Trying to prevent John Cena's birth so he couldn't star in the Marine?
The silent alarm's been tripped. It's neutralized all the codes in the entire building. Nothing will open anywhere now.
Yet the vault still opens. What would the most sacred place in the entire building be left open?
Hello?
Best reaction ever. He just sees a truck crash and he responds with,
Hello?
Hello? That may be one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen.
Call to John.
But you can imitate her voice. So why do you need her to call to John? In fact, he does imitate her later, so what was the whole point of this? And they act like they destroyed all the evidence of the Skynet cyborgs, but what about Arnold's arm that he lost in his fight with the T-1000? That's still around and it's evidence for the future. I mean, maybe that's how Terminator 3 happens, but they never acknowledge it, so it's still dumb.
Because if a machine, a Terminator, can learn the value of human life, maybe we can too.
But who cares? What an awesome line to end the film on. Yes, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but the characters save it. Incredible performances, mind-blowing effects, tremendous direction, a compelling, heartbreaking story of a kid and his lovable robot friend, and easily one of the greatest sequels in cinema history.